topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, everyone. I know it's week after Thanksgiving, and I don't know about y'all. I'm still got food, and just sometimes it's just hard to come back from holidays. But that said, we are ready to get your week going, and it's important to pay attention to December because a lot of people kind of like relax off. But the key is remember that December, especially if you're looking for a job or if you're doing any transitions, this is the time when a lot of like networking and all that happens. And so keep your eyes out on that. And today we are bringing you a wealth of leadership and a lot of different things with our wonderful guest, Russ Walsh. Welcome, Russ.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Welcome aboard.
Great. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, a beautiful morning.
Wonderful. So, Russ, tell us as to when you started out, and do you recall a moment in your childhood or when you were a young youth, if somebody left a positive mark on you?
Definitely. I grew up in a pretty happy family situation. Two older brothers. We played a lot of sports, but everybody was pretty encouraging. We got along well, and I was definitely different. I was building Legos when I was 3 years old, and just kind of a bit of a nerd, but kind of fun. A little bit of a prankster and things like that. So we had a lot of fun growing up. But I think for me, I remember in high school, somebody said, have you thought about going into engineering? I had no idea what that was. And I ended up choosing the path of electrical/computer engineering. And that's led me down the kind of the technology route that brought me to Silicon Valley about 25 years ago.
Yeah, like Silicon Valley back then, I think so. Those were the beginnings. So when you came, let's kind of compare, like, at that time and now. So when you were back then, what was it like 25 years back?
Oh, God, that's a great question. So it was a strange boom. It was a couple of years after the .com and the internet had launched. So there were a lot of companies who'd gone big time. Yahoo was one of the leading tech companies of the time. They still survive. They're still around. You don't seem to hear much about them anymore, but they're just kind of there chipping away. But
AOL?
Yeah, AOL, exactly. They used to send everybody a floppy disk in the mail about once a week.
Oh, yeah. And
marketing strategy.
Remember when that email came and, it would go.
Oh, yeah. Every time you logged in, it had to reload new versions and everything. But it was pretty cool that it all came together the way it did. I ended up, I was working at IBM. My last thing I did before I got the chance to come to Silicon Valley, and IBM was a great company. I really enjoyed it. But, the nature of the job I had at that time was a travel job. Every week, jump on an airplane and go work somewhere. And they would usually be like 6 to 12 month projects. So I spent a lot of time where you are in the Raleigh-Durham area on a big project for IBM. Loved that area, but still it was hard. I had a young family then. But one of my coworkers at IBM said, hey, there's a colleague of mine who wants to hire for a job in Cupertino, California. I was like, where is that? I have no idea. And she goes, oh, that's kind of the heart of Silicon Valley, right where Apple's headquartered and everything. And about 6 weeks later, after that conversation, I was on an airplane landing there and starting work in Cupertino with my family there. And it was nice. And I went from a commute of literally 400 or 500 miles by airplane every week to about 400 feet. Literally, my office was right next to the building we ended up living in. So I could literally go get a Diet Coke out of the fridge if we didn't have one at the office. So some pretty funny stories. But, at that time, Silicon Valley was booming. It was almost terrifying in a sense where prices, like rent prices were going up 50% a year, and people were, who had been paying $1,500 a month to rent, in 1998, were suddenly paying $4,500 to rent by the end of 2000. But then the whole .com thing happened, and it was just kind of a crazy mess. When it first started, it was, I got caught in a layoff myself, and I think in the first 2 weeks I was kind of looking for something. I was probably having 2 to 3 job interviews a day. I mean, there were just so many openings. But then when things really kind of broke a few months later, Cisco was the one that really broke the backbone of Silicon Valley. They were the leader ahead of Yahoo, just growing, expanding. They were the Google of that time. And when they suddenly started realizing they weren't growing anymore, in fact, they were having to make cuts, that changed the game. And in Silicon Valley, by the summer of 2001, if you could find anybody who'd give you an interview, it was a shock. It was just really is big of an economic and I'd say employment drought as I've ever seen. Certainly, we went through another one in 2008, 2009 out here. And right now, honestly, it's a pretty bad one it's not getting a lot of news, but the tech sector right now is really struggling. There's so many people, probably 1 out of 4 people I know in tech have been out of work or are currently out of work here. So it's a strange time, honestly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've got a lot of my clients, coming from tech companies, and I
Mhm.
find they're either worried about being laid off, or, it can be because of the economy where we are going through. And, it's very cyclical.
Yeah.
Or because of AI. Like recently I heard because the AI subdivision of IBM, like, the company that you work for,
Uh-huh.
it was in the news, I think so, a couple of days back, because their AI division is booming, they're planning to lay off thousands of people.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
so kind of, if you kind of go through these situations, so like what happens is, there is the technical environments, as you mentioned, there can be a boom. So like AI is coming up,
Right.
and then they need to hire more people. Like, okay, we gotta go. And then once you have reached that plateau, then you kind of let go. So there's, in these technical environments, there's always so much ambiguity. So how did you scale trust as an executive?
When the .com meltdown happened, LinkedIn didn't exist. There really weren't those kinds of social networks. So I really didn't have a big network out here at all. It was a tough ride for me, but things opened up that, I believe there's a God, and he made things happen at the right time and doors opened up. I moved out here with the intention of starting my own software company at some point. When I was in IT, the first part of my career, I was really good at writing systems to manage server farms and things like that before we even called them server farms and data centers and things like that. And even at IBM, I was considered one of their top programmers in that regard. So, but I knew one thing, creating software and selling software are two very different things. And I'd always been so much in the technical side, I was far removed from, the business side of it. So when I moved to Silicon Valley and worked for a startup, that was my chance I got in as a sales engineer. So, I mean, my first day off the plane, I'm literally in front of companies like eBay, I think Yahoo, and a couple of the other ones. Literally, we were out there, talking with them about different things that we could do on the technology front. And that was really good for me to get used to that notion, because I remember saying at some point, I'd love to be able to say, I've been inside the headquarters of 100 companies, because when I moved here, I'd only been the headquarters of one company in my whole life at that point, because I'd always worked a little bit remotely for the companies and never had a reason to go to the HQ. And I think now I counted it up, that I've probably been inside 150, if not 200 corporate headquarters in the last 25 years. And, ended up being heavily involved with Facebook's IPO about 14 years ago. So it's been an interesting ride of all the different things I've had a chance to do. Worked with a lot of really innovative startup companies who went public. I started working with a little company called Google when they were about 300 employees in 2001, 2002, and watching them kind of break out of a part of a building on the Intuit campus to becoming, the mega conglomerate that they've become. So I've watched a lot of really interesting companies grow from literally a couple of other ones I worked with were less than 100 people when I started working with them that are over 10,000 employees now. So it's pretty exciting to see how that works. And sometimes you can just look at the leadership and like, this company's going to make it. You could just see something about the nature, the chemistry of the way they were working. Zscaler is a good example. When I worked with them about 12 years ago, I just saw the leadership and the way they did things was amazing. And their first, I think their first 100 customers all came out of the Fortune 500, which is extremely difficult to do. But once you've done that, it's a whole lot easier to get the smaller guys when you've already proven you can do the big guys. And they were just brilliant, and they're doing very well now. So it's been interesting to watch this.
So you have been through a lot, like when you're talking about the IPO and seeing the growth and sustainability of companies like Google and Facebook. So there is a whole lot of difference. So let's say, when a company is going through, it's a startup, more, yes, you learn in dog years, because I've been part of startup companies myself.
Yeah.
That said, there is more relationship building, and there's more intimacy and more trust. But now when you go to the IPO, it's all about focus on money. So as people are working their way through, what would you tell the professionals and leaders going through that time?
Wow. Well, I have a friend and colleague who's been a good advisor over the years, a guy named Roger Royce. He's an attorney. He wrote a book, kind of Dead on Arrival, I think is what it was called, because so many startups make serious mistakes in the first year or two. Sometimes they give away too much equity. They make promises they shouldn't have. They bring people in when they, way before they need to. And it really sets things up for failure. The ones who seem to do it right are the ones who, the leaders, know when it's time to add the right people and how to manage things. They know how to go get customers early in the game and get buy-in, because you can build something in a vacuum, but if you don't have a customer who really wants what you're building, it doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of the story with Zscaler. Is Jay Chaudhry knew how to talk to the customers who had a major need. And he said, hey, if we build this, will this, be something you deploy at, major, like I said, Fortune 100 companies? And they're like, yeah, this is what we need. And when he gave them the alpha and beta versions, like, hey, this works. This is solving a huge problem for us. And boom, there you go. So there's a lot of things about making sure you've got a product, a market, and then you've also got the right people around you and a business roadmap. I mean, I've helped several companies raise money over the years, taking that plan of what's your 5-year model, and you've got to think about all those things, from who are we going to hire? When are we going to hire them? How much is that going to cost? And are we going to have an office and all those things? Because you have to roll it in. And one thing they at least used to teach in Silicon Valley was, if you need to borrow money, say, it's not really borrowing, but the investors, typically you start with a Series A round or an angel round. And that when you show your cash flow model, you never go below 50%, because they know you're going to spend more than you have, and your income coming from customers, accounts payable, always is later than you think. So there's a lot of things like that you consider. But it's interesting to watch how companies really take that, and so many have done well, so many haven't. I think they still say 4 out of 5 don't make it, right?
Yeah, and that is the case. And you provided some very key markers for success over here, so keeping that in mind. So you have seen that side. And then you've also seen where you led the consulting firm as the CEO. So tell us more about your journey to the rise of CEO, and what was the journey like?
It's been interesting. So this is my third time, if you will, of kind of running my own ship. The first time was a software company, and we had a lot of success. We got customers on board. We created a product for, at that time, backing up desktop and laptop computers. And we've had people recently like, can you bring that back? We still have a gap here. Sometimes people accidentally delete their box or Google Drive shares, and there's not a great safety net to recover. But the first time that was it. And it was a kind of traditional Silicon Valley model of we're going to build a software product and scale it. And that was before software as a service. So back then, when you delivered software, you literally was on a CD-ROM, people would install it and everything else. And then Salesforce changed the game, and so did NetSuite back in about 2006, 2008, to where you just, their application, you log in on the website and you're up and running. You can go from like a conversation like we're having now to 10 minutes later, you're running Salesforce, right? It wasn't that you had to buy all that equipment and plan for 6 to 12 months to implement a software product. So I was part of that. And then I worked and got the chance to work at EY, Ernst & Young, one of the big four accounting firms, during Sarbanes-Oxley, when that kind of broke in the aftermath of the Enron meltdown, which you probably remember that, which was a big part of the whole dot-com meltdown. Some of the dot-com meltdown was due to some fraud that was going on. People were manipulating their numbers and how much they were earning, and all of a sudden their stock prices are going through the roof, but it wasn't based on reality. And in some cases, it was based on some really false data. But nonetheless, having seen that, it created a whole new economy, if you will, in Silicon Valley of all these major tech companies had to go through these audits that they never did before. And now it's been going on for over 20 years. But that really brought Silicon Valley back to life to a certain degree. Anybody in tech who was kind of underemployed or unemployed had the chance to kind of step in and do some degree of audit. I jumped in on that myself, and it's been an interesting ride to do risk and compliance and things like that. So at EY, when I came on board, within about 6 months, they're like, okay, we need you in charge of the whole Silicon Valley region for our small to medium clients. So it's like 70 plus clients. So at that time, Apple and Google, Apple was still trying to come back. They were still not the mega giant they are. They hadn't invented the iPhone just yet. That was about to break through. So having a chance to work with those types of companies was really a great opportunity. And then I ended up going to work with one of my clients, a company called Opsware that was run by Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. And about a year after I got there, they got bought by HP. And Mark and Ben went on to start their Andreessen Horowitz, one of the probably the leading VCs in the world now, and have had tremendous success funding new ideas, new initiatives. But I maintained the relationship with Ben and especially and quite a lot of the other leaders there over the years. And it turned out I went back to a small consulting company after the HP acquisition, and it was kind of like a small version of EY, and it was nice. I was there for about 5 years. Again, that's where we got the chance to do the Facebook IPO. We were working with Twitter. We were working with a lot of leading tech companies. But I broke out and did my own thing for about 5 years, my own consulting practice. So the first time as a CEO was a software company. The second time was a consulting company, which are very different business models. And then I ended up working at GE and building out a new business unit that they were taking on from about 2016 to 2022. And that's what led me to kind of where I am today of this new initiative, which is in climate, such a different genre for me, but really fun and really exciting. So that's kind of where I'm at today. And it's very interesting where we are, and can't wait to talk more about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when you mentioned about that, you did the consulting company, you have been part of as an employed professional as well as a founder where you're leading your own company. So what would you say are the different lessons you've learned from both the journeys?
Yeah, definitely interesting. The first time I made some of those mistakes of giving away ownership of the company a little too early in the game. And one thing I learned with my consultancy, that which was about 10 years later when I started that, I never gave away a dime. It's like, I'll just pay people for their time, and we'll take that approach, because then I get full control. If I want to go left or right, I don't have to answer to a team of people, especially if you find yourself to where you have less than 50% ownership. Then it's just politics, and it's very challenging to navigate those waters. So that's been one thing that I had learned. It's the same way right now. I still own 100% of the company. Will I give away some? It depends. Right now, this is a very strange company. This is more of a movement than it is, a product or service this time, because we're trying to get the world to become aware of, a real big problem they're not that aware of. Everybody hears the word or the phrase climate change, whether you like it or not, it just comes up. It's been coming up for decades now. Greenhouse gases, we've been hearing about that for a while. But when it comes to sea level rise, I've got friends who live at the coast who aren't that aware of it. And especially people who don't live near the coastal areas, they don't realize what's happening. But, the sea has gone up 9 inches in the last 125 years. And this century, in 25 years, it's going up twice as fast as it did last year, and continue to accelerate. And while 9 inches might not sound like a lot, in some places where the sea is pushing in, it's kind of like, I use the term, the concept, if you build a sandcastle on a beach, right? And no matter how well you pack that, as soon as that first wave hits it, that thing's going to collapse, right? A lot of the land around the world is not rock. It's softer soil. So when that, as the sea rises 9 inches, the land itself can sink. And that's what's happening in Bangladesh and Indonesia, and even some parts of the Bay Area. Florida is having big problems with that. New York, a lot of areas that are along the coast and are dealing with that. But the sea could go up, in the worst case, more than 200 feet. It's done it before. I mean, I'm from South Carolina, and in fact, Raleigh, you're not too far away from that sand line where the beach used to come in. We don't know if that was 4,000 years ago or 4 million years ago, but nonetheless, it's happened, and we can't let that happen. That was different at that point in time, where civilizations, like, okay, if the sea's going up an inch a year, they could easily move away, right? They had time to pack up their tents or whatever, but we've built so much infrastructure along coastal regions that would just be devastating. And that, sadly, is, if you read the top books out there, everything's about retreat, that we're going to have to go to higher ground. And that's a terrible option, I think, when you think so many countries don't even have land over 200 feet. So they're saying, okay, you'll just fall into non-existence. The Maldives, they're already saying they'll be gone in 30 years. I mean, these are realistic things you can look up. These are coming from National Geographic, PBS, BBC, major trustworthy news outlets that are reporting this. So it's probably the biggest problem the planet's faced. And the sad thing is, most people are proposing solutions that are just traditional, that won't work, to beyond a couple more feet of sea level rise. And we're proposing, what if we can just redirect the ocean? and we're getting
what
some
is your proposal, Russ? You mentioned that this is a movement, so tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to get the mindset shift. We love the way that climate change awareness has been done very well, maybe to an extent to too much. And some of the doomsday picture that's been painted, that if the temperature rises 3 more degrees, we're all going to burn up. Some people have that perception, and that's not the case. That's not reality. I mean, I'm hearing in some parts of the world right now, because the temperatures have gone up and climates have moderated, they have 2 growing seasons now in some areas of the world. So it's been kind of a blessing in some ways. But at the same time, the climate issue of, as temperatures rise, and the melting ice is the problem. I mean, for anybody who's a naysayer, the whole issue of the discussions that major leaders of countries are having about warfare in the Arctic, you couldn't have that conversation 40 years ago. But now that the ice is melting in the seasonal periods, and it's opening that area up to where ships can traverse across there, including military ships, it's a whole different game. So things have happened Fortunately, right now, it's happening at a very slow level because, again, we've only gone up a few inches and we're a long way from going up 200 feet. And we're not seeing that that's going to happen this century, but they are saying it could go up 3 feet more before the end of the century, which is really alarming. And we have to do something about it. And that's kind of what I'm about, because we've got to get that mindset of, we got to start thinking about water. Where do we put the water? Because the water is going to melt. We can't stop that. The process is already in place, but it's like, what if we can do something really useful with the water and have a great outcome from this? I mean, you just look at about a third of the world's land is unusable because there's no water. The Sahara is huge, right? It's about the size of China, mainland. And you look at the Australia, similarly, 80% of it's fairly uninhabited because they have no water. So it's like, okay, what if we can take the water from the rising seas, redirect it inland, and change the game to where 40 years from now, you look at Western Australia from the air and it looks like the Amazon, right? A lot of water, a lot of hills covered with forest and agriculture, and really to change the game on this, and then create viable economies where people can live and thrive. It's really getting exciting.
And how would that happen? What would that, you've given me the vision.
Yeah.
That, what would the vision look like? And of course, having Amazon and forest and agriculture and booming economy, everybody's looking for that. There's no question about it. But what would be the pathway to it?
I think this is where we've got to really get the leaders who are driving climate issues and other international issues. This has got to get in front of them to where they go, okay, somebody's got a solution to this. It's going to be costly, but gosh, I just got off a conference 2 weeks ago, virtual conference with leaders from Singapore, the Netherlands, who were dealing with sea level rise, and the tens of billions of dollars they're planning to spend building seawalls and levees and moving ports and all this, all to deal with sea level rise, is crazy. If you add it all up, I mean, there's 400,000 miles of global coastline. I mean, it's in the tens, if not hundreds of trillions that we're forecasting to spend to fight sea level rise over the coming decades. It's crazy. And a lot of times people don't even know that their local tax dollars are going to some of these things, that they keep it fairly quiet. But go look at the website of any coastal city now in America, and they have a section on what they're doing about sea level rise and how much money they're spending kind of quietly as well. But the bottom line here is, what if, and this is what's interesting, I just was reading last week about an article that what they're doing to try to bring back forestation in different parts of the world, the Amazon, Africa, and there are funds now to kind of incentivize people not to clear cut. If you will leave that land alone, here's some money to kind of compensate that. It's like we kind of create these as, I'd call them world parks, not national parks. And in essence, like, we're going to protect that area. And so there are people doing that. So the notion that what if we could take a portion of the funds that Singapore and all these places are budgeting to spend and say, let's use that money to build these inland seas and redirect the sea inland. And then it's not so much necessarily that we're going to solve that problem totally with that method. It's maybe the largest portion of it, but also to capture water where it's falling. We've got property in the Philippines, and the Philippines has just been hit so hard this year with their seasonal rains, typhoon after typhoon, and 99% of that water went into the ocean, right? It just ran away. We could have captured some of that in some of those mountainous areas that are fairly uninhabited. And it's going to be a game of, where do we capture the water? That's what we're looking at. And certainly it's better to capture it freshwater if we can. So what if somebody can say, okay, we're going to build some reservoirs in our mountains, and it's going to be worth 1 inch of sea level rise, right? And if we can say, you know what, that's worth $100 billion. and so even if you're in Central Africa, far away from the coast, and you have the rainfall, and you say, hey, we're going to build these reservoirs, and the World Fund would give us billions of dollars for doing that, then economically that's great. Then you created this water space. You can create agricultural systems that are much more maintainable, freshwater sources. So a lot of benefits that could come from that. But in the end, if we find ourselves 40 years from now, we took the sea down a foot. Miami Beach at high tide still has 50 yards of a beach to walk on before you hit the water line. Those kind of things are a possibility of what we're looking at, that we can really flip this on its head and find ourselves getting ahead of the sea level rise a little bit, to where, at the end of the century, perhaps, we've taken the sea down 2 or 3 feet. And again, we've created more land around the world than we had, instead of losing it.
Yeah, those definitely make sense. And I know this is a small thing that a lot of my neighbors are doing. And here's the thing, I always say that, every little bit counts. A
Mhm.
lot of people are collecting the rainwater
Mhm.
and in the barrels and all that.
Mhm.
Definitely given that, and kind of coming back to the professionals, right? That you have the vision, and
Mhm.
you you went from owning 3 different companies and starting a movement. What would you tell? There are a lot of like Gen Zs and millennials who want to have meaning in their lives. And sometimes they're not happy, whether it is because of a toxic boss or because they're laid off, or it could be all their efforts are going into a company. And if they're looking to start their own company, what would be your message to them?
That's a great lead in. And one thing I've really been excited about, I've got 3 daughters of my own. So for them, the future, I've got a grandson now. The future they have is really important to me. And it's extremely exciting, as I've had some of these conversations the past year. Climate has just been this really doomsday dark cloud to most people. This is terrifying. They look at it and say, gosh, this is just gonna, make such a mess of the planet. And when you flip the narrative and say, what if the climate change is one of the best gifts the Earth's given us since electricity and steel, right? The possibilities of what we could do to transform parts of the world. And it gets people really excited, really hopeful that, wow, we could have a good outcome. We could have something really special. And I know people who are in construction are excited, because if you're in major construction companies where you're building bridges and in Dubai, and you're building tunnels in Sydney, Australia, every 4, 5 to 7 years, you're bouncing around to some other part of the world. You got to take your family, if you can even do that, and go to these places. But the notion that you could move to the Sahara or parts of Australia, and for 7 generations, you could build this thing, right? These inland seas, and your family can just thrive and put down roots and grow in a new way without feeling like completely transient, right? And then these people be a part of planning these brand new areas, right? Areas that when they, essentially part of what we're talking about when we dig these lakes, it's like, where do we put the dirt? Well, the dirt, we build hills around it, man-made hills. And at some point, we may fill the lakes in higher at some point if we need to. But people dream of living in the south of France, right? We have the mountains and the sea right there. We spent our holidays last Christmas in the south of Spain, and that also has beautiful mountains coming right down to the coast. We could even see Gibraltar from where we were, and stuff. And so imagine landscapes where people lived, where on one side perhaps you can see the ocean, on the other side you see this beautiful new lake that's huge and just breathtaking. The possibilities are really exciting of what we could create as we go through this. And what's also interesting is, again, greening these places up to a point where, water systems and then forest, and along the coast of where we might build these lakes and the canals coming in, we build mangroves and coral reefs and things that are very good for pulling the greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. So there's a lot of things that we can get as really good byproducts of the whole process and doing this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. That's such a beautiful vision to hold on to. And I'm sure that, as you're building the movement, because we need those, as you said, those, there are these barren lands in
Mhm.
Australia,
Yeah,
Sahara. And if we can get them back, it would be
right,
so good for the humanity.
right,
And so
absolutely.
what's next for you?
Well, again, we've got a long way to go, and I really do appreciate you allowing us to be a part of this podcast. Every week it seems now we're getting a chance to talk with more media outlets like this, including some of the major news outlets of the ABC, CBS, and so forth have approached me in the last few weeks to talk about this as well, to get this further out there. But again, we've got a long way to go. Nonetheless, we're making some real great inroads bit by bit. Yesterday, I spoke with the CEO of one of the largest geoconstruction companies in the world. They're based here in Silicon Valley. And the CEO and I were talking about the possibility of right now, probably the largest earth moving equipment in the world is about the size of a house, a good sized house, but that's pretty big, right? But when we were talking yesterday about what if we could build earth moving equipment the size of a cruise ship, like 100,000 times bigger than we've ever done before. And he said he was part of designing something like that 40 years ago when he worked at Chevron. He said the one thing he'll never forget is this piece of equipment that they wanted to build was so big that the tires, the tread on the tires, it's normally like a 1/4 inch on a regular standard car tire. He said it was 4 feet, just the tread. A child could walk underneath it, right? So the wheel on this machine they wanted to build was something like 40 or 50 feet tall itself, just the wheels. So this thing was humongous. And he said about the time they were ready to get going, the oil and gas industry took a whole different shift, and that never happened. But he said it was really fun designing it. But he was like, there's definitely physical issues that are challenging but what you can build that'll float on water versus what will move on land. But nonetheless, he's like, these are great ideas that could change the game. Because if we build these inland seas, we're going to need to dig holes in the ground the size of the Grand Canyon, maybe 10 of those in the next 150 years. And, it's going to be tough to do with standard equipment. But if we had bulldozers the size of cruise ships, we might be able to dig the Grand Canyon in 5 years and so forth. So the possibilities are really exciting.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you well, Russ, as you keep on taking this journey, and hopefully there's a whole lot more to come for the humanity, and, open up new vistas and vision and economy. So any last words for our listeners?
I mean, this is, like I said, at this point, it's a movement. We're trying to get world leaders ultimately behind this. So over the next few weeks, this week, later on, we're talking with people from NASA who are heading up global sea level rise issues. And we're excited to bring this idea in front of them. And again, the people who will be joining are from academia, some executives from some of the major construction companies, insurance companies. We're bringing all this together in the hopes of getting to a point where, okay, this is ready to go. We're going to do something here. And we're starting to have conversations about where would we build this? How fast do we need to build it? Where are we going to fund it? Those conversations, I certainly hope, are going to take off in 2026. And some of them may take off before we get to the end of the year. So it's pretty interesting what the possibilities are. And for people who are just watching on the sidelines who want to chip in, they can email me at info@russwalsh.com or russ@russwalsh.com. And we'll do what we can to follow up with you, let you know more about what's happening, and continue to watch and track. The CNET is kind of our hashtag, and you can see as this continues to develop. But Divya, thank you so much for having us be a part of this, for sharing the message. And I hope it does end up being something 10 years from now. We look back and like, wow, that show really helped fuel the movement in the right direction.
Absolutely. So you did mention your email. Where else they can connect you? What about your website?
We're building the website. The website's coming up soon. This has been happening so fast, that I've got a book coming out in January that really walks through the whole thing. I'm hoping the book will be, like Harry Potter, a series where a few years from now, we're writing the next book, and it's about, okay, now it's starting to happen, right? Where are we building this? What's happening? How are we funding it, right? I'd love to find myself 20 years from now writing the 4th or 5th book. And at that point, like, okay, this is real. This is happening. It's going to go on, hopefully, a part of critical world infrastructure for the next hundreds of years. But I'd love for my grandson perhaps to step in and take over the project someday and be driving it 50 years from now and really seeing what happens. That's kind of my hope and vision of where it goes.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, and we wish you all the best in creating this wonderful vision for our next generation. And listeners, support Rush whichever way you can. And thank you for being part of our show, because without you, the show would not be possible. Reach out to us. Let us know how we can serve you and support you to live the best life you deserve to live. And thank you, Juan, for your technical support. And be well. Take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.